In the late 1970s, British children learned about danger not from parents, but from government films that would be banned from TV today. These films were nightmarish, and they left real scars. Why did a safety campaign turn childhood into a test of nerve? The answer begins with a single government office, and a decision that changed an entire generation. In 1946, as Britain emerged from the devastation of war, the government faced a new kind of threat, one that came not from enemy bombers, but from the hazards of modern life. The Central Office of Information, COI, was created that year to serve as the state's official mouthpiece. It was tasked with shaping public behaviour for a country rapidly filling with unfamiliar dangers. High-voltage power lines cut across the countryside. Motorways sped through once quiet villages. Farms bristled with machines that could maim or kill in seconds. For the first time, these risks were not confined to factories or battlefields. They waited at the edge of playgrounds and behind garden fences. The COI Charter was broad and urgent, to educate, warn and protect the public from the invisible dangers of peacetime. This meant producing films about everything from road safety to food hygiene. But the stakes were highest when it came to children. In the decades after the war, child deaths from accidents soared. Open railway lines, unlocked fridges, and unguarded ponds turned ordinary afternoons into tragedies. The government saw itself as the only force capable of reaching millions at once, cutting across class and region. Through partnerships with ministries and local authorities, the COI became the central hub for safety messaging, distributing films to cinemas, schools, and most powerfully, television. The responsibility was enormous. Every campaign, every warning, carried the weight of lives lost or saved. The leaders of the COI knew that simply telling people to be careful would not be enough. They needed to command attention, to make risk unforgettable. That conviction would soon shape not just what the public saw, but how they felt and how they remembered danger. Directors who cut their teeth on gritty dramas and experimental shorts found themselves behind the camera for public information films, tasked with turning everyday dangers into waking nightmares. The Central Office of Information did not seek out horror legends, but it did give young filmmakers the freedom and the mandate to terrify. Budgets were tight, so atmosphere became everything. Scenes were shot with harsh shadows, unnatural stillness, and soundtracks that hummed with dread. Foley artists layered in the subtle drip of water and the sudden snap of a branch, letting silence stretch until the audience could feel their own heartbeat. The film Lonely Water stands as a masterclass in this approach, with Donald Pleasance's disembodied voice intoning warnings as a hooded figure watched children drown. The film blurred the line between safety message and supernatural threat. The cloaked figure, never named but unmistakably a Reaper, delivered his chilling promise: "I'll be back." For a child, it was less a lesson than a curse. These films did not rely on gore alone. They borrowed the pacing of slasher movies, slow, deliberate, inevitable. In Apaches, the camera lingered on the aftermath of a farm accident, refusing to look away. The horror was not only in what happened, but in how long you had to sit with it. No watershed protected young viewers. These films aired in the middle of the afternoon, sandwiched between cartoons and sitcoms. There was no warning, no buffer, just the abrupt intrusion of death and danger, wrapped in the authority of the state. For many, the message was unforgettable. The method was unforgettable too, a generation haunted by the sounds, the shadows, and the certainty that the worst could happen at any moment. By the early 2000s, the freedom to shock had vanished from British broadcast policy. Ofcom, the UK communications regulator, introduced a new code that placed the welfare of children at its core. Section 2.3 of the Broadcasting Code drew a sharp line. Any material likely to cause undue distress, especially to children, must not air before the 9 p.m. watershed. The days when a film like Apaches could slip into a Saturday morning slot were over. Depictions of child peril, once justified as educational, now triggered automatic review. Even the most effective films faced the same fate. The finishing line, notorious for its scenes of children bloodied on railway tracks, became a test case. While never formally banned, it was quietly retired from broadcast schedules. Today it survives only in archives and on digital platforms, absent from airwaves that once carried its warnings into living rooms. Ofcom's approach was shaped by a growing focus on harm and offence. New guidelines required broadcasters to assess not just the intent of a film, but its probable emotional impact on viewers of all ages. Complaints, once rare, became a regular feature of the regulatory landscape. In 1975, records show almost no public objections to distressing safety ads. By the 2010s, reports of offence and harm had multiplied, with Ofcom cataloguing thousands of complaints each year. The closure of the Central Office of Information in 2011 ended the era of mandatory public information films, sealing the transition from trauma-based learning to a system defined by risk assessment and regulatory oversight. The broadcast path for these films had narrowed to a point of near extinction, leaving only the digital world as their refuge. While television airwaves closed their doors to these films, the archives kept them alive. The British Film Institute now holds the masterprints of Apaches, Lonely Water, and dozens more, preserving them under legal deposit as artifacts of a vanished era. Some titles are locked behind age restrictions, but most are only a few clicks away for anyone curious or brave enough to watch. The real resurrection, though, happened online. YouTube channels dedicated to British public information films have turned these once forbidden shorts into viral nostalgia. Playlists titled Scarred for Life and Public Information Films of the 70s and 80s attract millions of views, fed by comments from Gen X viewers reliving the shocks of their childhood. What was once a fleeting moment between cartoons has become a rite of communal memory, dissected and reshared across generations. Archivists at the British Film Institute describe a steady stream of requests from researchers, filmmakers, and even former child viewers seeking closure or context. Some films, like The Finishing Line, are now studied for their psychological impact as much as their filmmaking. The paradox is clear. Efforts to protect children from distress have pushed these films out of the mainstream, but in doing so have amplified their legend. Instead of fading into obscurity, the most disturbing public information films have found a second life as digital folklore, haunting not just through memory but through algorithms, recommendations, and late-night curiosity. The debate now is not just about what should be shown, but about what can never be forgotten. Behavioural psychologists argue that terror can save lives. They point to the way a single image, a child's body twisted at the base of a pylon, in PlaySafe, lodges in the mind forever. This is the flashbulb memory effect, a moment so searing that it rewires behaviour. Supporters cite the drop in accidental fridge deaths after Unguarded Moment aired in the 1950s, proof, they say, that a nightmare is a small price for survival. But child psychologists reject this logic. They warn that such films do not teach safety, they teach fear itself. When a child hears the shriek from Apaches, the lesson is not about tractors or ponds. It is that the world is unpredictable and deadly, and that adults will let horror play out in the name of learning. The scars, they argue, last far longer than the message ever could. Modern safety campaigns have adopted a different language. The Think road safety films, now the government's flagship, trade terror for reassurance. With animated characters, gentle warnings, and upbeat music, the message is clear but never frightening, designed to inform rather than haunt. Yet questions remain about what is lost in this sanitization. Policymakers worry about an awareness gap, where the absence of visceral shock leaves hazards feeling distant or unreal. Technology is already changing the equation. Artificial intelligence promises to tailor safety messages to individual risk profiles, calibrating tone and imagery for each viewer. In theory, a future warning could be just unsettling enough to prompt action, but never cross the line into trauma. The spectre of the old films lingers, raising a final dilemma. How much fear, if any, is still necessary to keep the public safe? Fear can be banned from screens, but danger can't be censored from daily life. As safety messaging grows softer, real-world risks remain unchanged. The choice between protection and preparation shapes every generation. The lesson endures. What we shield children from, they may one day face unprepared.